Alafia family, welcome to the Everyone's Place African Cultural Forum on 1010 AM, where information is power. Uncle Justin Neb, hope your life is long, your health is well, and your strength that of many lions. My guest today, brother, has written 3 books out of the African creation energy system. The Science of Sciences and the Science in Sciences is part 1 of the trilogy. Pata Technology is another, part 3, and Supreme Mathematic, African Math Magic. So it's definitely my pleasure to welcome Brother
Nati.
How you feel today, brother?
I'm doing all right. How are you feeling?
Things coming well. How things coming on down at African Creation Energy?
We're putting in a lot of work, trying to help out our people as much as possible.
Definitely, man.
Yes, sir.
Let me take a quote out of your book to begin with, right?
All right.
Taking it out of the Science of Sciences and the Science in Science, almost at the end of the book, where you say that historians say that the scientific revolution that took place in Europe began with the publication of a book. And it is our hope that the publication of this book, entitled The Science of Sciences and the Science in Sciences, as well as other books written by African Creation Energy, will be the catalyst in the African scientific revolution, which will ultimately lead to the African Industrial Revolution, where there will be an improved quality of life, economics, and higher earning and income for African people. So when I read that, brother, the first question that came to my mind is that, are you saying that your work is maybe an extension or culmination of the work of many African scientists who preceded you?
Oh, yes, sir, definitely. As the old adage says, we stand on the shoulders of giants. Mm-hmm. And those giants whose shoulders I stand on are our ancestors who came before me. Whether they were in the diaspora or whether they were back on the continent or anywhere in the world, our people made great headways in the fields of science, mathematics, and technology. Mm-hmm. And, I try to build on their concepts and ideas that they presented, the different alchemy, metaphysics, etc., that they presented, but presented in a more operative way, not just in a theoretical way. As we all have learned in life, we experience things that seem to work in theory, but they don't really work in practice, and that's because they're missing that scientific component. So, that's definitely, I stand on the shoulders of giants. Those giants are my ancestors.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yes, definitely. And, as you say, and as people, before you that have had on this program, brothers like Oyibo, who've done work with Gagood, said that the solution of our problems lies in science, So when we examine, particularly when we look at how science is represented, especially on a theoretical level, we realize that what we have to do, and, what you've done so well in your books, is to take the concepts of science, to take the scientific method, to bring it out to the lab, and to extend it to, I guess, basically to all mental processes that occur in life. And that is part of the bridging problem, how we do that, how we take the scientific method out to the lab and bridge it to, the everyday problems and show, the regular, person that, that these problems we have could be solved through the scientific method. How you bridge that, brother?
Exactly. The funny thing is that we all apply the scientific method in our everyday lives, whether we realize it or not, outside of the laboratory and in our regular lives. Just a very, very simple example is just walking. Mm-hmm. The scientific method is basically you make a guess about what could happen. Mm-hmm. You test your experiment. You actually perform it, and then you come to a conclusion. Well, let's just say we're walking down the street. Now, you take a step, and you think in your mind, you make a guess. You say, well, I guess I can take this next step, mm-hmm. and I won't fall. Mm-hmm. And sometimes you perform that experiment, you take that next step, and you walk successfully, and every now and then you stumble. That's just a small-scale version of how we apply the scientific method in our everyday life. Mm-hmm. When you study the history of our people, that's actually something that we readily apply, not only as just a scientific method in the laboratory, but mm-hmm. as an actual way of life, because that is the motivating, I want to say spiritual science, or motivating concept that motivates the growth and creation of everything in the universe. So we applied that scientific method not only just in the laboratory, but also in life. And unfortunately, we're encouraged to put it aside and put it down, especially in this Western culture, and we don't necessarily follow through with those 4 simple steps. We'll make a guess, and we'll just guess, and we'll never test our guess. And even if once we test our guess, and it doesn't pan out, it doesn't provide any results, we'll still hold strong to that failing hypothesis. We'll still hold strong to that failing guess, as if it's going to one day do something that's going to help us. They say that insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. Right. That's scientific thought, and that's African thought, believe it or not. Right. So we, that's basically it. We have to shed ourselves of those concepts and ideas that hold us back from just applying that basic, simple African culture and philosophy that we now know as the scientific method, but it actually extends a lot further than that.
Right. Now, I want to lay the basis for our conversation by asking you 3 questions, which will deal with, I guess, our introductory course, on science from your perspective, right? I don't want to ask you all 3 at one time, but I guess I'm going to have to put them out. The first one is, what is science? And the second one is the etymology of the origin of the word science. And the third is the philosophy of science. So let's deal with what is science.
All right, no problem. Science is simply knowledge or information. That's all it is. And when you just think about life, everything that you can think of is information, for the simple fact that you can think of it. It's information. And so that in its essence is science, period. The etymology of the word science, actually, it comes from a word that means knowledge. I don't remember clearly if it's from Greek or Latin, but it comes from a word that means knowledge. Right. You know what I mean? So that's leaning towards my initial response, which was just basically information is basically knowledge. Now, when you speak about the philosophy of science, you're basically talking about the philosophy of obtaining information, the philosophy of processing information, right? Because that's what science is. Science is knowledge. Science is information. So the philosophy of science would be a method or an ideology of processing information, of processing knowledge and gaining knowledge and actually putting it into use, because information serves no purpose if you're not going to use it. You're just walking around with a big head, a lot of information that's not being put into practice. Exactly.
Right. So what determines the philosophy of science? How you go about obtaining knowledge? Is it the culture or is it universal? What determines that?
Well, it is culture. It is culture. It was originally culture. And whether you want to obtain knowledge or not, whether you want to obtain information or not, you'll do it. The only way you won't do it is if your brain dead. Now, it depends on how actively you pursue it. Will determine how much you gain. But you can't go a day without gaining any information or gaining any knowledge. Now, what happens, in terms of the philosophy of science, what happens is that we don't properly process all of that information that we gain. We don't process all of that information that we take in properly to discern, okay, what is true, what is fact, what will work, what won't work, and then being able to make reasonable conclusions based on the information that we've gained to actually be a productive individual in life. Right. There's certain people that their culture may be conducive to them not being productive. If you have a culture that's built on falsehood, then when they attempt to apply false information, it's going to fail every time, and then they get stuck in a loop of non-productivity. And that's one of the things that may have been holding our people back for so many years. Traditionally, when we get back to our traditional African cultures, you find that process of processing information and that concept of being able to correctly discern between truth and falsehood is something that is prevalent throughout the culture. And so you will find that we would be much more productive in those ancient times, right?
Right. So your books, what do they do? Provide us a path, to practice science in order to obtain the knowledge of what? Nature, reality, and God?
Yes, sir, exactly. I mean, I look at myself as a technician more than I look at myself as like a theologian or a theorist, or someone who presents ideas. All of my books are designed and geared towards actually teaching how to. It's up to the reader whether or not they want to apply those steps. But everything is technical in nature. Everything is applicable and practical in nature. Let's see. The science book, for example, is the closest book that I've written and that I ever will write to a philosophy and a theory book.
Okay.
But it's talking about the philosophy and theory of science, the philosophy and theory of being productive, right? And so that's the closest thing to a philosophy book that I'll write. But even in that philosophy book, there are how-to steps presented, how to think, how to process information, how to be productive. And so, that was my goal, because I saw, and, just critically analyzing the condition of our people, I saw that we were in a somewhat of a state of inertness and complacency. And so I wanted to write something to kind of, be like I said, a catalyst, be a inspiration, a motivator to get up and get to work. Back in the day, people were called activists. Now we've just settled for being conscious. You can be conscious and be in a coma. You could be laying in the bed and still be conscious, not up and active. And so I want to try to get people to be back active again. So that was, the motivating ideology behind those books.
Right. So how you classify your other two books, Supreme Mathematics, African Math Magic, and then Patah Technology, Engineering Applications of African Sciences? Okay.
So when you follow the philosophical ideas of knowledge, wisdom, and understanding, you find that they are practically and applicably applied in the fields of science, mathematics, and technology. Again, the word science means knowledge. Mathematics is a tool for understanding, and technology is an actual application, which, is the definition of wisdom. So those are like the operative expressions of those philosophical concepts of knowledge, wisdom, and understanding. So the Supreme Mathematics book would be the second book in the trilogy, moving from knowledge, going into understanding. Well, the operative expression of understanding is mathematics. And so I titled it Supreme Mathematics, African Math Magic, because when you hear the term Supreme Mathematics, which is a term that's actually coming from one of the black groups that arose in the 60s and 70s, when you hear that term Supreme Mathematics, it sounds very mathematical, right? But then when you hear the term African Math Magic, it doesn't readily click in the minds of people that that is something that could be operative or productive, even though that is a traditional African way of life. My goal with that book was to show that Africans invented math. Africans had a very useful way of applying mathematics, and all of those mythological, spooky concepts that seems to be presented in African culture actually had operative expressions, and so that was the motivating factor behind that book, Supreme Mathematics, African Math Magic. The Top Technology book, my background is an electrical engineer, and so when I started studying, I had the background in electrical engineering, and then I started studying, the traditional African culture systems, and I found a lot of parallels between, there's a deity in ancient Egypt, Kemet, whatever term, suits people better, but there's a deity in the ancient Nile Valley culture called Ta, and I found a lot of similarities between the concepts presented in electrical engineering and the concepts around that deity Ptah. Then I was fortunate enough to get a book by the name of by a brother by the name of Nur Ankh Amen called Ankh, the African Origin of Electromagnetism. Right. And it was a great book from a theoretical perspective. And I was like, oh man, I have to build on the work that this brother's done. You know what I mean? So I tried to present some because I consider myself a technician, so I try to present those same concepts in a technical arena, meaning a more applicable way. Actually give people how-to steps and things that they can actually do to experience and gain first-hand experience with those concepts and ideas that seem somewhat spooky. Right.
Yeah, you're right. Because, if you look at like some of the leading edge concepts in quantum mechanics, most of their models right now are being based on Adinkra symbols out of Ghana and Dogon cosmology. you know, because they're looking back at those old, what they call African mythology, to realize they were talking nothing but about quantum mechanics and quantum physics, you know?
Exactly. You know, I was doing research. They have a new concept in quantum physics that they call string theory. Mm-hmm. And when you listen to what they're talking about in string theory, and if you're familiar with, you know, again, Khan culture and Nazi the spider stories, or even the doggone culture, or even some of the early Nile Valley culture symbolisms and mythologies, it sounds so similar. It's like, whoa, this it sounds like the same stuff, you know, just being presented by a different group of people. And I mean, it begs the question, okay, well, are they really coming up with these ideas, or are they reading the ancient literature and getting inspired from that? So exactly.
Right. Now, you know, the science of sciences and the science in sciences, you break it down into the empirical and the rational duality, you know. So talk about the importance of that for me.
Yes, sir. All right. When you talk about the empirical, you're talking about real things, basically, just to make it as simple as possible. When you talk about the rational, you're talking about the world of the mind. You're talking about concepts and abstractions. One of the biggest things that I find to be a hurdle with our people in terms of applying information is being able to discern what is rational information, meaning something that's just a concept, and what is actual real information, something that can be applied, something that's real, something that is tangible. So when you talk about the empirical and rational duality, the duality is simply this. The rational world, the mind, the world of the mind, can create in the empirical world, can create in the real world. Yeah. However, the empirical world or the real world impresses upon the mind, and then the mind creates concepts to explain its real world. And so it's like a give and take. It's a flow. You know, it's those two systems, those two worlds are constantly exchanging information. It's expressed in modern science, or one expression of it in modern science is E equals MC squared. You have energy and you have matter. Your energy is your world of your mind. Your matter is the physical, tangible world. And so it's, you know, it's an ancient concept. It's being expressed in this day and age via science, and it's one of the most powerful expressions. Once people can correctly discern between the two, it makes an individual very productive. They won't attempt to try to classify something that is just a concept as a reality when it's not. One thing that people often struggle with is the existence of things. I always tell people, I say, well, you can't say that something doesn't exist, because if it didn't exist, you wouldn't be able to talk about it. Right. You know, it's the better way to say is, okay, well, does it exist just in my mind, or does it exist in reality?
Yeah.
Right.
You're right. And, you know, that reminds me that, you know, talking a particular language, you have concepts that in another language you might never have. You see what I'm saying? So like in, let's say you could, you could speak Akan or the Dogon language or whatever. The concepts that they have, you know, in that Dogon language, they don't have it in English. So let's say the Dogon people could think a thought that people who only know how to speak English could never think, you know. So that's the importance of language, and, you know, concepts coming through a language that might not be equivalent or even, you know, be able to be translated into the next language, because, you know, the concept of that thing just don't exist in the next culture and language.
Exactly, and that's why it's very important. Not only when you just speak to people, you can be talking to someone who speaks your very same language, and there'll be something lost in the expressions, because one person takes one of those rational abstractions. One person takes one of those words to mean one thing, you take it to mean something else, and then there's a whole breakdown in conversation within the same language. Now, when you move to different languages, right, those abstractions get even more skewed. Those words get even more skewed. That's why they say that, you know, especially during the times of slavery, and our ancestors did not have a word for Holocaust. Right. You know, they came up with this word, ma'afa, which was the closest thing that they could used to define that concept, but they didn't have that concept in their language. So it's, that's like you said, a lot gets lost in translation, and I end up spending a lot of time with people just defining things, defining terms, so that we can be clear about what exactly is being meant and referred to.
Right. In the West, we're talking about the African groundation as science. In the West, I guess the closest thing that most people know that is equivalent to what we're talking about is the practice of yoga, So, even, brothers like Muata, Ashby, and other people who deal with the concept of Egyptian yoga and take it straight back, So how, talk about that for me, yoga, and how that is equivalent to what you might be talking about in the science of sciences.
All right, no problem. There's always two ways of looking at something. You can take something literally, or you could take it metaphorically or symbolically. And so, let's say, for example, I'm trying to think of a good metaphor. Let's just say the man is running to the store. Well, that could translate from one African language into our language as, the man is running to the store. And people interpret it as the physical man is actually physically running to the physical store. But it could be a metaphor where the man represents one thing, running represents something else, or the store represents something else. And when you take it literally, it creates a whole different expression. So when you talk about yoga, the word yoga means to unite, right? And it's coming out of ancient African concept. I think the brother Muata Ashby, he defines it as simatawi, which in the ancient Metaneta means to unite, to combine things. Well, if taken literally, the people can take it to say, okay, well, it's uniting the mind with the soul, or the mind with God, or if they're trying to take a literal explanation for it. I take the unification of the two worlds to mean the unification of the empirical and the rational. Again, going back to the question you asked earlier, the unification of the mind, or the world of the mind, with the actual world of physical things, where the unification is the actual creation. If everything you believe in the mind can work in the actual physical world, then the result is a new product, a new creation. And so that concept that we know as yoga in the Western world, the brother Muata Ashby does a good job to show how it came from the Nile Valley culture. So I just, try to present another way of looking at it. Like, okay, well, what are these two worlds exactly that are being united? Right.
Definitely. Now, in yoga, they talk about the middle part,
Exactly.
And or the four positions of the sun. Let's talk about the four positions of the sun, because you find that in yoga. You also find it, among the African Congo, and you say that they correspond to the science of sciences in terms of the empirical method, dealing with the hypothesis, the experiment, the experience, and the theory. So talk about that in practical terms for me.
Yes, sir. No problem. All right. Just think about ancient times. There was no TV, and so what we had to watch was nature. And the biggest program to watch every day was the rising and setting of the sun. And so, you kind of have to put yourself in the place of those people. And so, the sun comes up in the morning, that means one thing, a new day, new growth, new experience, newness, right? It gets to its high point, that's the most productive time. It could be the hottest time, when heat is related to change, right? Then it gets to its final point right before it's about to set, and then there's the speculation of, okay, well, will this sun come up the next day, right? And so just looking at that concept, that process in and of itself is empirical, because they're looking at a physical thing, and they've transcribed it into an abstract object. But when you take the symbolism behind each one of those positions, well, the night position is a time when you have to speculate. You have to guess whether or not the sun is going to rise the next day, right? And that's the symbolic position of speculation. That's the symbolic position of assumption, right? the rising sun is the actual experiments, the test. It's okay, the sun did rise the next day, right? And so, and then the high noon point of the sun, that's okay. It not only did it rise the next day, but we can get to work. We can do what we did yesterday, right? And then the setting sun is when you start drawing your conclusions about, okay, well, the sun rose, it got to its high point, it's about to set now. My conclusion is that this sun is going to set again and rise again, right? So I'm going to go ahead and draw my conclusion at this sunset point in time and say, okay, yeah, the sun will rise again the next day. And so I try to make it as simple as possible, but that process, that simple empirical process that our ancestors observed and transcribed into an abstract object is in my opinion, is the first expression of the scientific method that we use in modern science today.
Let me go to the lines, right?
Yes, sir.
Brother Daki, how you feel?
Hey, God bless you. First of all, brilliant. Thank you so much, young scholar. And you do stand on the shoulders and on the arms and on the wings of the great ancestors and the riches of the Diops and Dr. Chancellor Williams, and I could name it endlessly, as well as your contemporaries who are your seniors like Dr. Marimba Ani. Listening to you, first of all, I want to thank Nati for having you, but also thank him for having your books that he's distributing all over the world. So I look forward to not only buying your books, but reading your books, but also encouraging others to do likewise. One of the things I just wanted to say to you, my brother, and is that as we talk about the notion of the mind, and our great teachers like Dr. Chancellor Williams and Dr. John Henry Clark in particular, when he talked about Dr. George Washington Carver, he said the scientists of the day, or so-called scientists of the day, and many of them were the white boys, never considered Dr. Carver, this great genius, a real scientist. Because when they ever asked him, how did you do that? How did you find that experiment or that discovery from that peanut soybean paint, all of the different things that he discovered, and revealed to us, to make us have worked at Tuskegee, he would always say God showed it to him. Now, they rooted in that old rational Western way of thinking. They say, well, wait a minute, you can't prove the existence of God by the scientific method, so you're not a real scientist according to their criteria for what a scientist is. And you've revealed to us that when you reach into the Khan tradition and the cosmos and the great questions Nadi has asked, that our notion of discovery and the use of the mind is always rooted in a beingness and in that oneness with the cosmic consciousness of what we consider to be God or Nyame or Yahweh or Jah or Allah, or not even having to put a name on it. Dr. Coltrane called it a love supreme. It is with God. And so I said it to say that as you continue this great work that you're and great path that you're on by producing things that cause us to do work and not just be philosophical geniuses, let us be mindful that this whole consciousness of what culture is, that's a question not to ask about culture. Culture is everything that you do. It's the way you breathe, the way you love, the way you worship your God, the way you don't worship your God, the way you create, the way you build, the way you create your language, on and on. And when we are mindful of that, then we won't find ourselves separating these segments. This is philosophy, this is science, this is religion, this is business, this is math. Because all of it is one, whether you call it a ma'atness, a harmony of at oneness. So I thank you so much for dabbling in all those different areas, because you are a priest, you are a healer. Because giving that information, you're healing our people. Giving that information, you're being an architect. You're helping us to construct ideas, but also products that they can sell, services, and the like. The last thing, and Dr. Thank you so much for your indulgence. One of the things I wanted to do today is to say, having stood on the shoulders of so many ancestors that have come before me, that prepared me, and that I've read, that on this day, on this show, I am announcing that I'm running for mayor of Baltimore City. I'm doing it on this show. I mentioned it on Larry Young's show. I didn't say what the office was. But on this day, on this show, because y'all have prepared me well, I'm standing on the shoulders of our ancestors, and not I am running, we are running to take back our city, that our folks can find themselves employed, knowledgeable, and have businesses like everyone plays, and read books like the books the brother is reading. And on tomorrow, in front of the black soldier, in front of City Hall, I'm announcing that at 5:30 tomorrow, officially. So thank you so much.
Hi, Daki Napata.
God bless you. Keep up the good work, young man.
Well, thank you so much, sir.
If you want, you can respond to the brother.
The brother blessed me, man, and I first.
I think we might have lost him. All right, so while we're trying to pick up, let me just announce that his books, he have 3 books. It's a trilogy. It comes in 3 volumes. The first is called The Science of Sciences and The Science in Sciences. Book 2 is called Supreme Mathematic, African Ma'at Magic and book 3 is called Pata Technology, Engineering Applications of African Sciences. Brother is, and like he said before, electrical engineer, so that is part of his foundation, of course, with understanding African high culture and science. Brother Dawood, I'm guessing you back with me, brother.
Yes, sir. My signal dropped on this.
No
my technology failed.
I hear you, man. Go ahead, brother. You were saying I think you're responding.
Yes, sir. I was just showing my gratitude to the brother and yourself. For having me on and choosing to distribute my work, and for the brother for his future endeavors. Like he said, there are a lot of philosophies that divide us. The one commonality that everyone shares, regardless of philosophy, is wanting to live, food, clothing, shelter, the basic fundamentals. And we don't discriminate. While we might separate based on philosophies, right? We don't discriminate and we don't separate when it comes to getting those things that we need. No one, very few people say, okay, well, this person is a Christian. I'm not going to buy their food. This person, the owner of Microsoft, his philosophy is this, and it differs from mine, so I'm not going to buy a computer. Very few people do that. When it comes down to the time of actually needing things for survival, needing things that we can actually practically use, people, the whole philosophical divisions go out the window. And so I find that a unifying factor is the actual productivity, the actual creation of goods and services. And so if your philosophy is actually centered around being productive, being creative, being technical in nature, then you will be the most productive people on the planet Earth. Right, and that way the money will follow you. The financial well-being will follow you because you produce so much. And so that like the brother said, look, I'm giving him my support, and everything that he's doing. And with the mentality like that, we'll definitely go far.
No question. If you look at African philosophy, man, the African way of life, African culture, everything is based on logic and reason, and sometimes we tend to forget that. I think in your book you mentioned, Obenga's book, the deal with, the philosophy of the pharaohs, where, he have the method by which logic was processed in ancient Egypt being a 7-step thing from Tep to Jemi Ek Nefer, and I think you broke it down into 4 parts, so if you could talk to that for me.
Yes, no problem. I mean, Brother Obenga, he presented it in about 7 steps. I presented it in 4 steps, but it's basically the same 7 steps. You could actually present it in 2 steps. If I can go deep into the Nile Valley culture just for a minute, you have a concept called Ma'at, right? Ma'at, they say means truth. It means order. Well, when you're talking about truth in today's modern times, you have to ask, well, how is truth determined, right? Truth is determined by way of logic. Truth is determined by way of reason. If I say that the water is red, and you know that water can't be red, or, you've never seen any red water, or when water is red, there's a chance that something has gotten into the water to make it red. Well, you use your own logic and reasoning to discern whether or not that statement is true or false. And so, you can present those steps for processing logic and reasoning in simple 2 steps. It's called binary in today's computers. I want to write a book called The African Origin of Computer Programming, where people look like, well, they didn't have computers in Africa, but I'm like, they had binary. And binary is what runs the computers. Truth and falsehood. That's logic. And that's an ancient African cultural philosophy.
Right. Definitely. You're right. Let me go back to the lines, right? Mo, how you feel?
Yes, I just want to say that's the good work you're doing. I also wanted to ask a question. As far as the concept, like you said, far as creating practical goods and services, like, I really agree with that because, like, even if you look at the Chinese, right, they create and they build a lot of different stuff that America use. And that's why, like, to a certain extent, they have a lot of influence over us. And that's why, like, America owe them money, and that's all I really wanted to say, and do you think you can expound more on that, the creative side, like what you was referring to.
All right, thanks, Mo, man.
All right.
Oh, yes, no problem. Okay, well, I mean, yes, what you're saying, like, again, philosophies divide us, right? And so let's say you have a person who might be a Taoist, or they might be a Buddhist. They might prescribe to those different Asian philosophies personally, right? You might not want to become a Taoist. You might not want to become a Buddhist, but you may want to drive a Honda.
Right.
You may want to drive a Nissan. You might want to drive a Mitsubishi. So it's the actual practical good and service that transcends the philosophy that divides us.
Right.
Now, when you look at our people in Africa and you're talking about missionary work, they don't come in with the Bible. You know, they don't come in with Christianity. They don't come in with the different philosophies. They come in with food. They come in with clothing. They come in with practical things. And from those practical things, then people then adopt the philosophies. You know, and so the practical thing is what transcends the philosophies that divide us. And my point that I was making earlier is if you have a philosophy that is based around producing, based around being practical, then you'll be the most productive people on the planet. Excuse me. For example, if you look at the ancient Nile Valley culture, the actual building of those pyramids, the actual building of those different temples, that was their religion. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not saying that they actually drug the blocks, but let's just say they were dragging those big blocks to build the pyramids, right? Well, that was they were worshiping. You know what I mean? And they took as much pride in doing that physical work to produce something as you would, you know, going to the church, going to the mosque, going to the synagogue. So, you know, when you have a philosophy that's centered around being productive, right, that will make you the most productive person on the planet. That will make your group of people and everyone who prescribes to that philosophy very wealthy, because you'll have so much to produce, you'll have so much to sell, you'll have so much to export to other countries. And so, you know, like the young brother said, he agreed with it, and it's a fundamental truth. No one can deny it.
Right, definitely. Donna, how you feel, sis?
Pretty good. How you doing, Nadi?
Good.
To your guest, when you talk about philosophy, I remember in college we had to take a philosophy course, and that was the most enlightening course because it taught you how to analyticalize what's around you, kind of go more in deep and give a theory about a philosophy of something or how to philosophize something. And I look at African American people today, and our ideas of philosophy, because we've been so removed from our culture, our African culture, and our heritage, that we don't even use philosophy anymore. We don't philosophize a certain thought that creates a culture and a way of life. So we're all like stumbling and falling off each other, and we become more individualized. I'm the one worried about myself. That's it. I don't care about nobody else, which makes us a lost people. And I wanted you to elaborate on how African American parents, families, can reunite a philosophy of life that protects and brings their children up to a standard of living so that we can become, again, the scientists of the world, like our forefathers and mothers did back in Africa. And I'll hang up and listen.
Thanks, Donna.
Thank you.
All right.
Yes, ma'am. Okay, well, let's see, not only philosophy in school, but, you know, mathematics, science, you know, pretty much every subject, you know, while we're coming up, myself included, you know, the way it's presented in such a way that you become disinterested. You know what I mean? A lot of people tune out in the math classes because they say, well, I can't use this. I don't see how this is useful. I don't see how it's practical. I don't see how it's applicable. And then, like, if they're fortunate enough to go to college and taking philosophy as a required course, you know what I mean? Like, they'll be like, well, look, this is boring, man. I'm learning about all these people that don't look like me, these big words, I don't understand them. Look, I'm just trying to take this course so I can get credit and get out. Right. And so the reality is that the way we presented concepts in ancient times, we dressed it up. We dressed it up. When you hear about, a story, there was this one deity and there was this other deity and his brother killed him and they threw him in the river and then he rose up again, and like it sounds exciting. That grabs the attention. And so that's one level of learning it. Now, that's a mythology. But then there's another level where it's like, okay, well, each one of those things represented something. And this is what was being told by that story. And this is when it clicks in the minds of the young people to say, okay, I see, I get it now. I see how this is useful. So, while the concept was being presented in the form of a mythology or presented in the form of a cosmology, whether that concept is philosophical in nature, whether that concept is mathematical or scientific in nature, it's being presented in such a way that the people can relate to it, that is interesting. And then once they're given the keys, once they're given the symbolic meaning of all of those things, then they can say, okay, yeah, now I can use it. It ignites that fire, and then they become productive. So, basically that's it. I have a idea, and I'm going to go ahead and throw it out there because somebody might beat me to it, but I'm here for the good of our people. If we could take all of those sciences, math, philosophies, etc., and because we know that our people respond to mythology, respond in a way that respond to things that are interesting, we could take all of those concepts and dress it up, in a mythology, but still provide the keys and the meaning to those things. Then our youth won't get disinterested. They'll learn the concept, and then they'll become more productive. Now, the downside of that could be, okay, if we don't give them the meanings of those different mythologies, then they might take it and go around thinking that it's something real. So you have to provide the meanings to it if you're going to do it that way. But it's a proven method. You look to the past. It's a proven method that worked for us. Right.
Because we don't want the mythology to be the story itself. But, you hit on a point here, and Donna hit on a point when we talk about the methodology of learning, and learning styles, because in a lot of times you look at these education systems and you say, you know what, on the bottom line, it's really not set up for Africans to succeed in it the way they have it set up, When you look at the learning styles of African children, rap is a good example of that, Look how many young children know, hundreds of rap songs, because that is the type of methodology that Africans have always used, in terms of learning. I look at Baltimore system, and if I could exclude the politics of it for a minute, but you have about 600 Filipino teachers who have been brought to Baltimore City to teach math and science. So you want to tell me that people could not, look into the future and see that they are not training enough, black people in Baltimore City to be teachers in math and science in the education system? You see what I'm saying, brother? That you have to send to get 6 Filipino teachers. So it really talks about, the methodology, the learning styles, and if they are really interested in having African students learn at all, Yes,
sir. Right. And that's one of my other purposes for not only writing those books, but actually doing what I'm doing. I don't want to put the mantle of responsibility of other groups of people to do for us. You know what I mean? Because at that point in time, once they start, then we're going to owe them something. I'd rather that our people actually take on the mantle of responsibility, and those of us who are educated, those of us who are not educated but just regular smart people that can do things. Look, let's put the philosophies aside, and then let's agree that we need to do something good for the good of ourselves, our children, our children's children, etc. Right, and let's just get to work. That's how I see it. When you talk about the rap songs and people being able to remember the rap songs, well, that's because of the drum. The drum is a form of Morse code. Morse code is a form of binary. As I expressed in the book Supreme Mathematics, and so that's mathematical music. Everyone knows music is mathematical in nature, but because a lot of our people are right brain thinkers, that's a way to actually learn those mathematical concepts a lot easier. And so, it would be necessary to have a math book for our people where math is taught via music, right? So
Definitely. But you talk about wisdom in your book, and I guess essentially your book is about wisdom. Wisdom is a totally different level. It's not just having information and being able to put it out there. It's knowing when to put it out there and knowing how to connect stuff. So Well, you say wisdom is the ability to apply knowledge, as a result of crossing the waters. A lot of people might be, you talk about the transformation from the rational world to the empirical world, and this process being, I guess, mediated by the Nibiru or the planet X. So talk to that for me.
All right, no problem. I mean, again, when you speak about mythologies, I don't have any overwhelming evidence that any of those mythological things exist in the empirical world. Right. So, when I'm pulling concepts and ideas from mythology, I'm keeping them as concepts and ideas as abstractions or mathematical objects. And so, you mentioned Nibiru. It means crossing. It means crossing. And so, then you have to get into the mythology about, okay, well, what is being crossed? Or if you want to do a comparative study with the yoga, you have to say, okay, well, what is being united? And my entire point of what is being crossed and what is being united is that world of the mind where you think something and the actual world where you're doing. You know what I mean? And a lot of people don't make that transition. They don't make that transition. They'll receive knowledge. They might say that they understand it, but when it turns to going to that wisdom level, going to that third point and applying it, is not too many. If you ever get a group of people in a room and let's say everybody agrees we need to feed the homeless, and then you say, okay, all right, how many people are going to go out there this weekend with me and actually feed the homeless? You're going to probably have a small percentage of the people that showed up to actually do something. And so that's the crossing, that's the transition, that's the unification between the concept and the actual doing that our people are struggling with. And if we can manage to cross that bridge, then, we'll be very productive.
Right. Songs are always important in our healing. I had Wayne Chandler on with me, not too long ago. And, he talked about particular songs for healing, particular processes, So in the work that you are doing, how you incorporate song into the whole thing? All
right. Well, myself personally, I'm not very musical. I've taken some music classes, coming up as a youngster, but I admire people who are musical. I don't know how to read music. I admire people who can read music. I admire singers. I try to hold a note and the glasses start breaking. So I'm not very musical, but when you start talking about just basic tones and vibrations, everything has a tone and a vibration. It's expressed in music, but it can also be expressed in action, right? And so when you're talking about doing work and actually doing things, someone or something by the vibration, by their tone, by their work or their sound or their song, etc. So in terms of the actual music and tone, while I'm not that good of a singer, I am a good worker, and you can know my music and know my tone by my actions. Like they say, actions speak louder than words, and so that's how I would incorporate it into the work I'm doing. I would put the challenge out there to anyone who's listening that if you are good at music and you want to do like a math and music or music math type book where you're teaching math through music or you're teaching different concepts through music, I would encourage you to do it because our people need it. That's a way that would be a very helpful tool. Right.
And as we look to wrap up in a few minutes, I'm going to ask you to make the connection again, between, the relationship between having the science of sciences and the science in sciences as a philosophical base for African culture, the relationship to that to African technologies, the relationship to the quality and standard of life for African people. If you can make that circle around and make that relationship for us.
Yes, sir. Bring it around full circle. I like that. But it's definitely, when you speak about the science of sciences, you're speaking. Well, when I'm writing about it in the book, I'm talking about the empirical method. When you speak about the science in sciences, you're talking about the rational method. When one is the world of the actual practical doing things, and one is the world of the actual thinking about things and coming up with concepts. And it is the unification of those two worlds that make us the most productive, most financially well-being people that could possibly ever exist, right? The actual terminology, the science of sciences and the science in sciences, I first came across that terminology in a book written by a writer by the name of Amanubi Rayata, and I did my further research on that concept and idea. I was intrigued by it as a possibility that it could be something that we could apply in our lives, that it was an actual real cultural philosophy that our people used, and upon doing the research and finding out, okay, yeah, it was something that we used, it was something that made us very productive, and in order to improve the conditions of our people now, it could be something that we could apply now to become very productive again.
Definitely. And is it a distinction between, a lot of times when we talk about science, we essentially talk about natural science, but is it a connection between, let's say, the natural sciences, the social sciences, the formal sciences? Is it a connection that we best use, not separating them?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a connection. I mean, they're all science. Science is life. Knowledge is life. Information is life. So, it's all connected. One thing that happens in the university system is that they're separated. And so that those operative methods that are used in the natural sciences of physics and biology and chemistry, etc., that scientific method is not necessarily always applied in the social sciences. And so the social sciences end up suffering. For example, one subject matter that is studied in the social sciences is religion. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And that scientific, because the two are separated in the university system, that scientific method is not applied to religion. Mm-hmm. And when it's not applied to religion, certain things that would have failed under the scientific method get to be pushed forward. Mm-hmm. So, for our people, like I said, we applied that method in all walks of life, in all areas of life, and it shouldn't be separated from our social sciences. It's science. All of it is knowledge. All of it is information. All of it is life. All of it is necessary for life. It should be applied in all areas.
Right. My guest has been joining me from African Creation Energy. There are 3 books, The Science of Sciences and The Science in Sciences, 9 to the 9th Power of 9, Supreme Mathematic, African Magic, and Pata Technology, Engineering Applications of African Sciences. His books are all available at Everyone's Place, located at 1356 West North Avenue in Baltimore, and the telephone number is 410-728-0877. Let me thank you for joining me today, brother. You have any contact information in case anyone listening in want to contact you, brother?
Yes, sir. They can contact me via email at Osiadan, that's Osiadan, at AfricanCreationEnergy.com, and also on our website, AfricanCreationEnergy.com. If you go to the Contact Us section, you can link up with me that way also.
Give thanks, Dawood. We talk, brother.
Thank you so much, sir.
All right, take good care.
All right, Hotep.
Hotep. Definitely stop by Everyone's Place and pick his books up. So until next week, family, Shem Hotep.